if I'm picking up a book for my child, it needs to have a moral teaching.
Don't even tell me about it. I always thought, even when I was a child, that I'm going to be a writer and an artist like my grandma.
A lot of your writing is about animals, environment, and insects as well.
The appreciation of nature came in from a very young age. Eeeks sounds like excuse me, each book is like a piece of art. My father actually allowed me to quit my job, and he paid me a salary for a year to write a novel. First rejection was I almost had a heart attack. Don't try to push down your ideas onto them because they get enough of that in school. I cannot write more than 5,000 words. Whatever comes in inverted commas is mostly what you should be putting into the comic.
Why specifically write about the relationship between kids and insects or animals or the wildlife?
It was all like part of growing up. A picture is worth 1,000 words.
ये short term distractions बाद में जाके addiction में convert हो जाते हैं.
That critical thinking is not allowed at all.
So which was the first book that you wrote?
I'm not going to tell you how old I am.
Hello and welcome to Basic Funde Clear. हम नैनीताल की वादियों में बैठे हैं और आज हमारे साथ एक बहुत ही स्पेशल गेस्ट मौजूद हैं जिनसे हम बात करने वाले हैं चिल्ड्रंस राइटिंग पे. सो वी हैव अमित अस आरती मुतन्ना सिंह, जो चिल्ड्रंस राइटर है, जर्नलिस्ट है एंड पब्लिशर भी है. सो उनसे आज हम बात करेंगे और जानेंगे कि ये जो डिजिटल एरा में इतने सारे जो कंटेंट है स्पेशली बच्चों के कंज्यूम करने के लिए, उसमें राइटिंग और बुक्स कैसे स्टैंड आउट करते हैं एंड उनकी पर्सनल जर्नी भी जानेंगे कि कैसे उन्होंने चिल्ड्रंस राइटिंग पे ही लिखना शुरू किया. वेलकम टू आवर शो मैम.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Ma'am, the pleasure is all ours. So okay, to begin with, पहले तो हम यही जानेंगे कि why did you only decide to write about children's fiction and not any other age group?
I think it is a combination of so many factors. My Nani was a writer and an artist. She used to write in Kannada. We belong to Karnataka. In fact, we belong to a small little place called Coorg, which is otherwise known as Coorg. And she used to write fables, basically for children and for adults. And I always looked up to her. I mean, she's no more. She was my hero and will always remain my hero. And because she used to write fables, which are basically primarily for children, but also for adults, I thought I'd start with that first and see how it goes. And if I found I was good at that, then I'd stick with that. Otherwise, I'll try some other genre. So that's how the children's books came into it. And I also happened to have my son around the same time when this whole change happened from advertising to move to writing.
Okay.
Because at one point, I'd always thought, even when I was a child, that I'm going to be a writer and an artist like my grandma.
Okay.
And my mother also is a writer, just incidentally. So I'm hoping my son would give up his music at some point and get down to writing.
Writing basically runs in your blood.
Yeah, I'd like to think.
Okay, so you just mentioned that you've lived in Coorg and you've also lived in Nilgiris as well. And a lot of your writing is about animals, environment and insects as well. So did that play a role in, the themes that you picked up for your books?
See, that to some extent did. The thing is, having grown up in the Nilgiris and spending so much time in Coorg, there's so much time we end up spending in nature. I mean, there was no television when we were growing up because there's no connectivity in the boondocks on a tea plantation or on a coffee plantation. We didn't even have electricity in the coffee plantation, my grandmother's place. So we were left to fend for ourselves outdoors. So you get fascinated by, I remember the first insect I actually got fascinated by is, I think you call it Jugnu, firefly.
Firefly.
Yeah. And Coorg is in the season of the blossom showers. It's like, it's like you can walk actually with the light of the fireflies.
Oh, wow.
It's fabulous. So I think the appreciation of nature came in from a very young age because you were taught to sort of appreciate and that the world belongs to everybody. The forest is for everybody and live and let live. And when I grew up, and I would like to think that the work I do for WWF, which is World Wildlife Fund, on insects and birds and animals and stuff, is my way of doing CSR, where I can't afford to just give money. So I do the books, then they make the money and it goes to their cause, basically.
Okay. So the children's book that you write, so there's a series called Eeeks.
Yeah.
It has a very funky name. It's a very funny name.
Yeah.
So you write about insects, about the young people meeting insects and, something about those insects. So can you tell us something about that?
See, the thing is, when we came up with the idea of the Eeeks series, WWF was doing a lot of serious stuff on animals, and you know how it is. After a point, kids just get fed up of listening to "Take care of the bear." It's all correct, but it's like it becomes just noise, background noise for them. So I thought we have to kind of turn it on its head and make it appealing to a kid. So when you see a title like Eeeks right across the front cover, somebody's going to look at it, right? And have a very wacky cover as well. And ultimately, so we combined the wackiness, and we've used limericks, we've used a wacky story about kids per se, and then brought up the information about the insects slowly, quietly within the pages of the book. So they don't really realize they're picking up something informative when it's actually, you combine it with a whole lot of wackiness.
Right.
And I found humor works very well with children. So we use humor a lot.
Okay. So which was the first book that you wrote?
I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but the first book that I wrote was called Bobo's World.
Bobo's World. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
it
an
was
interesting name.
Yeah, that's about this little boy called Bobo, who's his pet name. And it was published by Writers Workshop. It's a publishing house from Kolkata.
Okay.
I'm not going to say Kolkata, it's Calcutta. So Calcutta. And it was like, and the book is produced, so all the books in Writers Workshop are produced so beautifully. It's made in handmade paper. And all the titles are run by calligraphy. And all the covers are hand woven cloth. Done by these women and an NGO.
Okay.
So each book is like a piece of art. So for my first book to be published, like, that was a big boost for me and gave me a whole lot of impetus and saw me through a lot of rejections that publishers end up sending you. So that was my first book, Bobo's World.
Oh, okay, so you just mentioned that you had to face a few rejections as well. So what was that feeling like?
The thing is, people just assume because they see the final successes. I mean, you go to a bookstore, you see Arthy Muthanna Singh, so many books here, and she's written 35 books. The number of rejections, nobody comes to know about. And I also don't write about it because it's just part and parcel of being a writer.
Correct.
And it's not that just because you've got so many books published that you send a proposal to a publisher and they're going to go, oh, Arthy wrote it and just take it. It doesn't work like that.
Okay.
The same way, it doesn't work when somebody says, oh, you already got so many books published, you must be knowing the publisher. Why didn't you just put in a word? I've written a book. Everybody's written a book. Everybody's written a book, right? So rejections I've got. And I've got, the first rejection was I almost had a heart attack. I mean, I was like, I didn't realize that everybody gets rejections all the time. I've just got used to my grandmother's success books. Everything she wrote got published.
I think you had the same notion that I had, because you've just imagined that, okay, they're established writers, and I feel that, okay, I am a good writer, so maybe my book would get published easily, but then
not at all.
Not at all, right?
And I thought I was a great writer because my first book got published, right? So I mean, like, if somebody must be waiting for my books to come to them, right? And there was one rejection, there was a second rejection, and then fortunately, I started writing for the Deccan Herald newspaper had a children's section called Open Sesame. So I started sending on a Sunday. It came out only on a Sunday for children, basically. It is a separate section only for children that came out on a Sunday.
Okay.
So I started writing for them, and there my stories started getting accepted. So that was a little bit of a balm to my wounded ego at that point. And then slowly I started writing more, and then. But the thing is, all over those years, I was also working full time. I mean, it's very difficult to be, when you start out, you can't say, I'm a writer, and this day and age, you can't be like an artist like Van Gogh sitting in the garret and starving. And I mean, you have to be practical, right?
And there are challenges attached to that as well.
Exactly, yeah. So I took to copywriting for a long time because it's still with the written word. Journalism and copywriting, I used to just interchange between. So I was in Indian Express, and then I was working for Ulka advertising and all that. All to do with the written word, of course. And writing on the side.
Okay.
So that went on for years and years and years until 2017 when I quit my job with Coca-Cola, that is Limco Records, that I was handling for 13 years. And I got into writing full time with another writer friend of mine. We started this little startup called Syllables 27.
Okay.
So under Syllables 27, we co-author all the books that we pitch to publishers. So we pitch an idea to a publisher like an individual author would. And if they like the proposal, we started out telling them that we'll do the designing and the illustrations ourselves too. And fortunately, Penguin Random House, which is the biggest publishing company in the world, agreed to, as a test run, to do 3 books.
Okay. So are you an illustrator as well?
No, I'm not, but I've got a very good sense of design.
Okay.
And I was a publisher in Scholastic for a while, so I know what works with what, and I know which illustrators work with which story.
So you do have some creative say in the covers that are designed for your books?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Lots of say. And since I have a lot of say, it has to have my stamp ultimately.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. So
now it's only now that I can afford to do it. It's only since 2017. Before that, it had nothing to do. I had no say in what came out with the illustrations of my book.
Okay. So the kids today, or in general anyway, so they have a very, very small attention span.
Tell me about it. Huh?
So it's very difficult to write something for them which is interesting enough to grab their attention for a longer time, for them to stay throughout the book, So how do you manage to do that?
See, the thing is, I tried writing a novel. Let me just start from somewhere else. And I realized I'd got so used to writing for children. So the upper word limit is basically for older children. Maybe you can have it, say, 5,000 words max. 12.5 stories is about that much, basically. And I found I cannot write more than 5,000 words. I started this novel. My father actually allowed me to quit my job, and he paid me a salary for a year to write a novel, because I think he didn't take children's writing very seriously, frankly. And for 1 year, I wrote chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. And after chapter 4, I had writer's block, big time. It never used to happen to me for children's writing. And this is, I had the title, I had the whole architecture of the book was already done. And I got stuck, and I finally told my dad, I'm sorry, I have to go back to working, because and that novel is still not finished. Because I realized my attention span is also the same, more or less. For me to carry on a story, I lose, not the plot, I lose interest as well. So when I'm writing, like if you're writing for an age group of maybe 4, you can't have more than 300 words.
Right.
And maybe if you're going up to the age of 8 or 10, 1,500, 3,000, like stretching it. So within that, if you want to keep their attention, you have to have humor, you have to have something that's a little irreverent. And don't try to push down your ideas onto them, because they get enough of that in school and enough of them from their parents, right? So stay slightly out of the box, but not so outside that the parents won't buy your book.
Okay.
So that balance, tightrope walking you have to do.
Okay, so when it comes to children's writing in India, specifically in English, so there are not many writers, you can recall. So when we were very young, so we had Champak, we had Chacha Chaudhary, we had Tinkle.
Amar Chitrakatha, you should have must have.
Amar Chitrakatha, right. So there's Panchatantra as well. But ऐसे एक डोमिनेंट स्पेस में जहाँ पे सबसे पहले अगर हमें कुछ भी इंग्लिश में कुछ पढ़ना हो फॉर यंग किड्स, तो वी गो बैक टू फेमस 5 और Enid Blyton, Secret 7, J.K. Rowling. So there are many writers. But इस space में how do you manage to have a stronghold in that particular sphere?
See, the thing is, we don't write. We write from the age group of 4 to 14. And then it's for adults. The ones that we've done on Mahatma Gandhi and Abdul Kalam, and they're for adults, general public. They're collected as editions, basically, made specially. It's got gold embossing and everything. So basically, to people to keep like you would a coffee table book. For children, you can't really do all of that, but you have to make the cover really interesting enough for them to be able to want to pick up. And that's when you have to make sure that it does not, whatever happens, it should not look like a textbook.
Okay.
And you spend a lot of money on, which is why it ends up being it's expensive to produce a children's book, because illustrators, like I insist on only them if they're coming from an NID or something. They really have to be good. Designers, the same thing. And they're all expensive. So the production of a children's book, even though it's just 32 pages, has to have enough of wackiness, enough to sort of get the kid to see, oh wow, that cover looks interesting. Or you turn the pages, you find something like in the Eeeks series, as an example, Eeeks, I saw an ant. The illustrators actually has the ants walking through the script.
Right.
I mean, when somebody sees something that's out of the ordinary, it has to stand out in some way for the child to first pick it up. Then after that, when you start reading it, then you find the humor in it. And humor is a big hook, really a big hook. And writers don't use it enough with children. Because children, I mean, they're sick and tired of being preached to and said this should be done, that shouldn't be done. And you should be loving animals, you should hug the tree. And, I mean, they're hearing that all the time.
Right.
The other ways, like we did a comic. Oh my God. A comic is a different ballgame altogether, by the way. It is the easiest thing for a child to read. It's the most difficult thing for a writer and so to work on.
Okay, how so?
Yeah, so what we decided to do a comic, we were doing a project for WWF again. And it was a project on the Nilgiri tar, which is an endangered species, and also happens to be the state animal of Tamil Nadu.
Okay.
And this chief minister had earmarked a sanctuary for the Nilgiri tar because the numbers were dwindling like crazy. Because they're very shy and very get scared very easily. And because of people, constructing closer and closer into the jungle, they had very little territory for themselves. And finally, he earmarked this territory, which has made a lot of difference to the numbers going up. So we were commissioned to do this story. So we said we'll make it a comic because, first of all, we're talking about an endangered species. And how much preaching can you do about that? So we'll club it along with a combination of ooty and chocolates and going up the tree and elephants. And the Nilgiri tar ends up being just part of the story without the kids realizing. But in a comic, writing for a comic, you have to do so little writing, but the illustration has to match to the rest of the talking for you. So here we're used to writing the script, we're used to writing the what comes in the inverted commas and the text. You're not supposed to write all of that. Whatever comes in inverted commas is mostly what you should be putting into the comic.
Okay.
So it took us the longest possible time. We did this book called Valli's Nilgiri Adventures. So we brought in the monkeys and the elephants and the Nilgiri squirrel, Malabar squirrel, everything, and of course the Nilgiri tar. And fortunately for us, Vishwanathan Anand is the brand ambassador for WWF, and he loved the book more so because it's the first book his son picked up without being forced to pick up the book. And M.K. Stalin, who's the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, saw that interview by Vishwanathan Anand and got all the book translated into Tamil and given free to every single school in Tamil Nadu, in Tamil.
Okay.
So I've been doing sessions in Tamil medium schools regarding this book, which I really enjoy because my Tamil is better than my Hindi, frankly.
Okay. So when it comes to writing for children, there are multiple themes, multiple characters that you could have picked up. Why specifically write about the relationship between kids and insects or animals or the wildlife?
That's my way of giving back, frankly, because I had such a wonderful relationship with wildlife and trees and animals. My mother used to live in a tea plantation. Our garden was 1.5 acres. So climbing trees, tree house, collecting jacaranda, being able to recognize every plant and tree and insect in there. Then when snake would come to the sandpit, it was all like part of growing up. And putting this into storybooks, we've done this book called Vatsala Loves Snakes. And again, I have a weakness for the girl child, basically, because it's, which now my publisher said, bahut ho gaya. I mean, put some poor boys into the picture as well. And because most people assume that girls are going to be more scared about snakes and guys are.
That's a common notion,
yeah,
right?
Common notion. So I was like, this one I'm not changing. It has to be Vatsala. Though the story is actually about my son. It's a true story about my son.
Okay.
But when I asked him permission to use his name, he said no. So then I changed it to, and it suited my purpose of having a girl protagonist. So
he didn't want others to know that he's scared of snakes?
No. He can't use my name without permission. That's all it is.
Okay, all right. Okay, so one more thing. Usually, parents are of the opinion that if I'm picking up a book for my child, it needs to have a moral teaching.
Don't even tell me about it.
I get from your reaction that you totally disagree with it.
No, I've had to listen to all of it, and then says I'm paying 250 rupees for 32 pages. And he's thinking it's got, some of it has just got like 10 words on the page. I mean, she's almost like equating each word to a number of rupees that she's spending, And I can understand from parents mainly because they haven't done much reading. And very often, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So if you have a fantastic illustrator, you might not even need any words to illustrate what he's trying to say or what I'm trying to say. But that battle is an ongoing battle. Unfortunately, I sometimes lose it, sometimes win it. It's an ongoing thing. You can't really do very much about it because I think also parents are in this bind of having to feel that if they're spending money on a child that's not a toy, it better be worth it.
Okay.
And worth it means it has to be, geographically sound or scientifically sound or mathematically sound or something that's going to be some paisa vasool. And just this wacky story about an insect that Eeeks sounds like excuse me, But it's an ongoing battle. But fortunately enough parents who think otherwise, I don't have to explain, so it's okay.
I mean, anyway, हम घर पे बहुत सारी चीजें सिखाते हैं बच्चों को. उसमें अगर if they get to read something which doesn't teach them anything, it's just for their entertainment. They love to see the illustrations or read whatever is written. I think that would be a good thing to do for kids.
The one of the youngest children book we've ever written for the age group of 4, and the title is My Grandfather's Funny Eyebrows.
Okay.
And the illustrator has done such a fantastic job. It's basically a grandfather who has very bushy eyebrows and very eloquent eyebrows. So by judging by the expression on the eyebrows, the grandson could tell whether the grandfather is happy because he'd always be in a newspaper or a book. So coming into the room, he'd check and see if it's frowning.
So he could only see the eyebrows.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the illustrators actually made those eyebrows come alive like 2 caterpillars, basically. And it's mentioned in the story, like 2 caterpillars looking over the, on the newspaper. And kids just simply love it. But the number of words in that entire book is 250 words. Now, for a parent to pick up a book and say, I mean, look what is written. It's 250 words, my God, and then it costs $350 or something. But good illustrations and good productions cost money because if you want good quality, you can't make a book like, for me, black and white for a storybook is just not done.
It's too boring for even
not adults. Who's going to pick up the book in the first place? And you want to teach children about color and design. Makes a lot of difference, right?
Okay, so since we're talking about color and design, so there's another thing that I would love your opinion on. YouTube pay or any other social media platform, there's plenty of content present for kids in the form of videos. But then people, the young kids, they get addicted to those contents. Now, इस era में जहाँ पे सब कुछ digital है and it's a very easy fix ना कि अगर आप खाना नहीं खा रहा आपका बच्चा तो आपने क्या किया उसको phone पकड़ा दिया and वो देख रहा है and since the child is distracted you can easily feed him or her.
True.
ऐसे में how important is it कि you spread the word कि books पढ़ाओ, that's more important. And I think ये short term distractions बाद में जाके addiction में convert हो जाते हैं. So what would you want to say on
when my
that?
son was small, fortunately we were living in Goa at that time as well. He grew up as a beach bum in Goa, frankly, which is very convenient for me. So and he didn't even want to touch the television because it was so boring sitting indoors. He was climbing a tree, following a snake, all that kind of stuff, which was lucky for me actually. But once we moved to Bombay, it was a lot more difficult because even though we were living in Colaba and in a huge house, it still means he didn't get his, his nature fix, and television was a lot more available there, and his friends had movies coming home and DVDs and Harry Potter and all that started. So in school, what they'd done was they'd made it that they had 2 library periods a week. And what's happened, I've noticed across in schools that I've gone to for sessions and creative writing sessions, is that there's no library period anymore.
Okay.
Most schools, at least I don't know if it's still in the hills, but in the plains and Delhi and everything, most schools don't have the library period. So if you're not making sure that the school itself is not making sure that reading is important, it's going to transfer into the kids. So when we were growing up, we had an English teacher. It was a sister school of a school in the UK. So our English teacher, the librarian, the music, they were all Britishers from London. And my English teacher was she was what do you call? A grammar Nazi.
Okay.
No hi allowed, no that is, it has to be. And so my English, by the time I finished standard 10, was like kick-ass, okay? And that's when you go to college and everybody's saying, hi, what the hell? And,
what's up?
Yeah, what's up? What's up is, of course, much later, not when I went to college. But there it was compulsory. We had to read a book. We had to write a review and your opinion of whether it was worthwhile. If it was on the Times bestseller list, do you think it was worthwhile being in the Times bestseller? And if not, why? So we've got to think critically about what exactly this. Just because a book is a bestseller doesn't mean you have to like it. And if you don't like it, why don't you like it? That critical thinking is not allowed at all. A book is foisted on a child. You read this, do a book review, and go. You don't have a choice.
Okay.
So, and I think library period has to be made given a lot more serious thought in most schools, because I'm telling you, if you want to be a good writer, or even a good human being, I think everybody needs to read, man.
True. We had a compulsory library period in our curriculum, but then again, I think today the things are very different.
You're not finishing the curriculum, take off the library period. Not finish the curriculum, take the PT period.
That's what.
Then the kids get the feeling that it's not important. If you make it as indispensable part of a curriculum that you are not going to kick out the library period, not going to kick out the PE period, then those become as important as your science and your math and your and everything else. No?
True. Okay, ma'am. So one last question. So when it comes to, again, Indian children's writing, so is there anything that you feel is lacking in today's writing, or what should be included in it to make it more, interesting and comprehensive, maybe?
See, the thing is, I would like to try, after Roald Dahl came into picture, all of us wanted to think that we're going to try and write fantasy fiction. But, fantasy fiction is so way ahead in the West. It'll take a long time for any of us to catch up. And any other way of catching up ends up being mythology linked. Which is a path that I don't want to have to take, because there are enough people who are doing it already. But pure fantasy, I think, is a big gap in that needs to be filled in Indian writing. Otherwise, I think almost everything is covered.
So are you planning on writing something about that?
I think I know where my forte lies. Let me just stick to that. I don't think fantasy would work for me, frankly. I don't have that discipline to continue a fantasy story through an entire realm of existence of a genre. No.
Okay. So thank you for joining us, ma'am. It was wonderful talking to you.
Likewise.
And this was our conversation with Arthy Muthanna Singh. And like, share and subscribe to our channel to, meet more new authors. Tab tak ke liye, thank you.